respectfully neglected to share the Pentagon's report last week. Nevertheless, I have now incorporated insightful comments from both the Hudson Institute and Council on Foreign Relations in order to clarify its essential points. The title of this report is the 2024 China Military Power Report. In recent developments, Indonesia has made a decision to join BRICS. This alliance will effectively place Indonesia under Chinese influence. Joining the BRICS coalition could have significant implications on both defense and economic aspects for Indonesia. It remains uncertain whether this move is beneficial for our respective nations or not. Only time will reveal the truth. Anyway, stay safe.
All right, let's jump right in. Today we're looking at the Pentagon's report on Chinese military developments. I'm sure you know it's a pretty big deal for all of us, especially here in Indonesia.
Yeah, no kidding. This report lays it out pretty clearly. I mean, it's really remarkable how straightforward they are. The Pentagon is basically saying, look, China wants to be a top-tier military power, a world-class military by 2049, and, well, they're moving pretty aggressively in that direction.
Yeah, that's one of the things that jumps out right away, right? It's that naval expansion. China already has the largest navy in the world, but they're not stopping there. The report estimates something like 435 ships by 2030. That's a lot of ships.
Yeah, and it's not just the sheer number, right? We're talking about some really sophisticated stuff. Advanced warships, more and more submarines, and a definite uptick in aircraft carrier deployments. They're really making a statement.
Yeah, and speaking of making a statement, the report talks about this joint patrol the Plenand did with the Russian Navy out in the Pacific Ocean. They even went all the way up to the Bering Sea.
Right, and that's a real signal. What they're saying is, hey, we can operate pretty much anywhere we want. It's a clear message about China's ability to project power far from its shores.
And that has implications for all of us in the Indo-Pacific, right?
Yeah.
Including the South China Sea, which, as you know, is a pretty strategic area for Indonesia.
Absolutely. And it's not just the ships. The report also dives into China's nuclear modernization. And again, it's not just about upgrades. They're building entirely new systems like ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles.
And SLBMs too, right? Submarine-launched ballistic missiles.
Yep. And there are even whispers about them developing hypersonic glide vehicles and fractional orbital bombardment systems. This is some next-level stuff.
And it has everyone a little on edge, I think. These advancements could mean a much greater nuclear reach for China. And that obviously raises questions about strategic deterrence in the region.
Right, and it's all happening against the backdrop of this already tense geopolitical landscape. It adds another layer of complexity to an already very delicate situation.
It does. So the picture the Pentagon paints is pretty stark. But I think to really understand what this means, we need to get some other perspectives. The Hudson Institute, for example, they basically echoed a lot of what the Pentagon said, especially about how quickly China is developing its nuclear capabilities.
Yeah, and they went a step further, too. They're really pushing for the U.S. to beef up its own nuclear deterrent, basically to counter both China and Russia. They see those two countries working together more and more, and, well, they're not exactly thrilled about it.
Right, they definitely see it as a major challenge to the status quo. Now, the Council on Foreign Relations, they offered up like 6 key takeaways from this whole report. One that stood out to me was their focus on information dominance, basically how China is aiming to control the narrative in any future conflict.
That's a really important point. It's not just about ships and missiles anymore. It's about controlling the information space, using things like cyber operations and influence campaigns to kind of shape how people see things.
So it's a whole other battlefield, basically.
Exactly, and one that's already pretty active. China's using everything from state media to social media platforms to push their narrative. And sometimes, well, it's not always the most accurate information, if you know what I mean.
Right, so it's about winning hearts and minds, too.
You got it. China's playing the long game here. They're trying to influence public opinion both at home and internationally to get people on their side. And it's pretty sophisticated stuff.
So it's like a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Military strength, economic influence, and then this whole information warfare element.
Precisely. It's a much more complex game than it used to be.
All right, so we've got this big picture of China's ambitions, but now let's bring it a little closer to home. How does all of this actually impact Indonesia and ASEAN?
Well, Indonesia has already started taking steps, things like the National Defense Council and the talks with Russia about naval cooperation. They're focused on things like submarine rescue and joint exercises.
And that makes sense, given everything we're talking about with China's naval expansion, right?
Yeah, right. It's a recognition that the security landscape in the region is changing and that Indonesia needs to adapt.
And that's really the key question here, isn't it? How does Indonesia navigate this increasingly complex and, frankly, a little bit scary environment?
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure. The decisions that are made now are going to have a huge impact down the road. And there's a lot to consider. China is a major economic partner for Indonesia, but it's also becoming a potential security threat.
It's like this delicate balancing act.
It is. Indonesia wants to maintain good relations with China, but it also needs to protect its own interests and its sovereignty.
So how do you strike that balance? It's a question that I think a lot of people are grappling with right now, not just here in Indonesia, but across the region.
Absolutely. And there are no easy answers. But I think the first step is to really understand the challenges and the opportunities. And that's what we're trying to do here today.
Right, to give you the information you need to make those tough decisions, to develop strategies that work for Indonesia in this rapidly changing world.
Exactly. It's about empowering you, giving you the tools to navigate these choppy waters and come out stronger on the other side.
Okay, so we've got a lot to unpack here.
Right.
Let's dive into some of the specifics of the report. What stood out to you as particularly important or surprising?
Well, one thing that really struck me was the sheer breadth of China's ambitions. They're not just focusing on one or two areas, they're making major investments across the board. From their navy to their nuclear forces, from cyber warfare to space, they're pushing the envelope everywhere.
And they're doing it with a level of resources and determination that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's almost like they're playing a different game than everyone else. They're thinking long-term, strategically, and they're willing to commit the resources to achieve their goals. And it's not just about matching the U.S., it's about surpassing them.
And that's a game changer for everyone in the region, including Indonesia.
Absolutely. This isn't just an abstract geopolitical issue. It has real-world consequences for Indonesia's security and its economic well-being.
So what are the key takeaways here for Indonesia? What are the things that Indonesian military staff need to be thinking about as they process all of this information?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that Indonesia can't afford to be complacent. The status quo is changing, and it's changing fast. The old assumptions about regional security no longer apply.
Right, it's a whole new ballgame.
Exactly. So it's time to reassess, to rethink the strategies and the partnerships that Indonesia needs to thrive in this new environment.
So let's talk about that. What are some of the concrete steps that Indonesia can take to address these challenges? What are the options on the table?
Well, there are a lot of different levers to pull. Strengthening its own military capabilities is obviously important, and we've seen some movement in that direction, like with the submarine program.
Right, modernizing the fleet, investing in new technologies.
Exactly. But it's not just about hardware. It's also about building capacity, training personnel, developing new doctrines and strategies that are tailored to this new threat environment.
So thinking about how to fight a different kind of war, one that's less about conventional battles and more about things like cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and maybe even conflict in space.
Exactly. And that requires a different kind of thinking, a different kind of skill set. And Indonesia needs to invest in that, both within its military and within its broader government and intelligence communities.
So it's about building expertise in these new domains, but also about breaking down those traditional silos between different agencies so they can work together more effectively.
Right. It's about a more integrated approach to national security. And that's not always easy, but it's essential in this new era of great power competition.
Okay, so strengthening its own capabilities is one piece of the puzzle. But what about partnerships? What role can they play in helping Indonesia navigate these challenges?
Partnerships are absolutely crucial. And luckily, Indonesia has a lot of strong relationships to build on, especially within ASEAN. There's a real opportunity here for regional cooperation, for countries to come together and present a united front.
So sharing information, coordinating strategies, maybe even conducting joint military exercises to deter potential aggression.
Right. And it's not just about ASEAN. Indonesia can also look to partnerships with other countries that share its concerns about China's behavior. Countries like the US, Japan, Australia, even India.
So building a network of like-minded partners who can support each other and provide a counterbalance to China's growing influence.
Exactly. It's about building a coalition of the willing, countries that believe in a free and open Indo-Pacific and are committed to upholding the rules-based international order.
And that's a message that resonates, I think, not just with governments, but with people across the region who are concerned about China's growing assertiveness.
Absolutely. There's a real appetite for this kind of cooperation, this sense that we're all in this together and that we need to work together to protect our shared interests.
So there's a lot of work to do, but there's also a sense of hope, I think, that by working together, we can navigate these challenges and build a more secure and prosperous future for the Indo-Pacific region.
I agree. And I think Indonesia has a key role to play in that effort. It's a regional leader, it has a strong voice, and it has the potential to really make a difference. But it all starts with understanding the challenges and developing a clear-eyed strategy for addressing them.
And that's what we're trying to do here today, to provide the insights and the analysis that can help Indonesian military staff make those tough decisions and chart a course for the future.
Exactly. We're providing the tools, the information, the food for thought, but ultimately it's up to Indonesia to decide how to use those tools and to chart its own path forward.
And that's a path that will be closely watched, not just by China, but by the entire world. The stakes are high, but so are the opportunities.
And I have a feeling that Indonesia is up to the challenge.
I do too.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about a specific area of concern that came up in the report, China's information warfare capabilities. This is something that the Council on Foreign Relations also highlighted, and it's a threat that's often overlooked, but it's incredibly potent.
It really is. And it's something that's happening right now all around us. We're being bombarded with information, with narratives, with attempts to shape our perceptions of the world. And it's coming from all sides, not just from China.
Right. It's like this constant battle for our attention, for our hearts and minds.
Yeah,
And it's hard to know what to believe sometimes.
exactly. And that's what makes it so dangerous. When you can't trust the information you're getting, it's hard to make informed decisions. It's hard to hold leaders accountable. It's hard to function as a democracy.
So what can be done about it? What can Indonesia do to protect itself from this kind of information warfare?
Well, the first step is awareness. We need to understand how this is happening, what the tactics are, what the goals are. We need to educate ourselves, our families, our communities about how to be critical consumers of information.
So it's about media literacy, about teaching people how to spot fake news, how to identify propaganda, how to think critically about the information they're consuming.
Exactly. But it's also about building resilience. We need to develop a healthy skepticism, to question everything, to check sources, to be wary of anything that seems too good to be true or too bad to be true.
And that's not always easy, especially in today's world where information is coming at us from all directions, 24/7.
It's not easy, but it's essential. We need to be proactive, to take control of our own information consumption. We can't just passively absorb whatever's thrown at us.
So we need to be more discerning, more thoughtful, more critical.
Exactly. And we need to support institutions that are working to combat disinformation and promote accurate, reliable information. That means supporting investigative journalism, independent media, fact-checking organizations, and other groups that are fighting the good fight.
So it's about building a strong ecosystem of information where truth and accuracy have a fighting chance against lies and propaganda.
Exactly. It's a battle that's worth fighting because the alternative is a world where we're all constantly being manipulated, where truth is whatever the most powerful people say it is. And that's a very dangerous world indeed.
And it's a world that China seems to be actively trying to create, at least according to the Pentagon's report.
That's the concern. They're investing heavily in these capabilities, and they're not shy about using them. We've seen it in their attempts to influence elections in other countries, in their efforts to control the narrative about human rights abuses in Xinjiang, in their propaganda about the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. They're playing a very sophisticated game, and we need to be aware of the rules.
So it's a wake-up call, really.
Yeah.
A reminder that we can't take our information environment for granted. We need to be vigilant, we need to be informed, and we need to be prepared to push back against attempts to manipulate us.
Exactly. And it's not just a matter of national security. It's also about protecting our individual freedom, our right to think for ourselves, to make our own decisions based on accurate information. That's what's at stake here.
So it's a battle worth fighting on all fronts.
Absolutely. And it's a battle that we can win if we're smart, if we're strategic, and if we work together.
Okay, so we've talked about China's military modernization, their information warfare capabilities, and the implications for Indonesia and ASEAN. What are some of the other key takeaways from the report? What are the other things that Indonesian military staff need to be thinking about as they grapple with these challenges?
Well, I think one thing that stands out is the need for agility and adaptability. The situation is evolving rapidly, and there are a lot of unknowns. So it's important to be flexible, to be able to adjust plans and strategies as needed, to be comfortable with a certain level of uncertainty.
So it's not about sticking to a rigid plan, but about being able to react and adapt to changing circumstances.
Exactly. It's about having a clear vision of where you want to go, but also being willing to course correct along the way, to experiment, to learn from mistakes, to be constantly evolving.
So it's a very different mindset than the traditional top-down hierarchical approach to military planning.
It is. It's more about decentralized decision making, about
Right.
empowering people on the front lines to make judgments based on the situation they're facing. And it's about fostering a culture of innovation and creativity where people are encouraged to think outside the box and come up with new
So
solutions.
it's almost like a startup mentality applied to national security.
In a way, yes, it's about being nimble, being responsive, being able to pivot quickly when needed. It's about embracing change rather than resisting it.
And that's not always easy for large bureaucratic organizations like militaries.
It's not, but it's essential if they want to be effective in this new environment. And I think Indonesia has the potential to do this. It has a young, dynamic population, it has a history of innovation, and it has a strong spirit of entrepreneurship. So the ingredients are there, it's just a matter of harnessing them.
So it's a challenge, but also an opportunity.
Yeah.
A chance to build a more modern, more agile, more effective military that can meet the challenges of the 21st century.
Exactly. And I think that's something that should be exciting for Indonesian military staff. It's a chance to be part of something new, to be part of a transformation, to be part of building a stronger and more secure future for Indonesia.
Well said. Now, let's zoom in on a specific area of concern that's relevant to Indonesia's maritime interests. China's activities in the South China Sea. The report highlights their continued militarization of artificial islands, their aggressive actions towards fishing vessels from other countries, and their overall efforts to assert control over this strategically important waterway.
It's a very worrying trend, and it's something that Indonesia is directly affected by. The South China Sea is a vital waterway for Indonesia's economy, and it's also a key part of its national security. So China's actions have the potential to undermine both.
So how should Indonesia respond? What are the options?
Well, the first step is to make it clear that Indonesia is not going to tolerate this behavior. That means speaking out forcefully against China's actions, both bilaterally and in multilateral forums like ASEAN. It also means taking steps to strengthen its own maritime security capabilities, such as investing in new patrol vessels and enhancing its coastal defense systems.
So it's about deterrence, about sending a clear message that Indonesia is willing and able to defend its interests in the South China Sea.
Exactly. But it's also about diplomacy, about working with other countries in the region to push back against China's assertiveness and to uphold the principles of freedom of navigation and international law.
So it's a multi-pronged approach, combining military strength with diplomatic engagement.
Exactly. And it's about finding ways to cooperate with China where possible, but also being prepared to stand up to them when necessary.
So it's a delicate balancing act.
It is. But it's a balance that Indonesia has to strike if it wants to protect its interests and its sovereignty in the South China Sea. And it's a balance that other countries in the region are also grappling with.
Right, this isn't just an Indonesia problem, it's a regional problem, and it's one that requires a regional solution.
Exactly. And that's why ASEAN is so important. It provides a platform for countries in the region to come together to coordinate their actions and to present a united front against China's assertiveness.
So ASEAN can be a force multiplier, amplifying the voices of individual countries and making it harder for China to divide and conquer.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for Indonesia to be a strong and active member of ASEAN, to play a leadership role in shaping the organization's response to China's challenge.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about China's military modernization, their information warfare capabilities, their activities in the South China Sea, and the implications for Indonesia and ASEAN. It's a complex and challenging landscape, but it's one that we need to understand if we're going to navigate it successfully.
I agree. And I think the most important takeaway is that we're not powerless in the face of these challenges. We have agency, we have options, and we have the ability to shape the future. But it all starts with awareness, with understanding the situation, and with developing a clear-eyed strategy for addressing it.
Well said. I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise. It's been a truly enlightening conversation.
It's been my pleasure, and I hope this has been helpful for Indonesian military staff as they grapple with these complex issues.
It's a real dilemma, isn't it? You know, on the one hand, we've got these security concerns with China becoming more assertive, but on the other hand, they're a major economic partner.
Oh, absolutely. It's a tough spot for sure. I mean, Indonesia's always had this free and active foreign policy, but this is putting it to the test.
Yeah, Finding that balance, engaging with China, but also protecting Indonesia's own interests, that's the key.
Right, and that's where ASEAN becomes so important.
Yeah, a united front could really make a difference, right? Make sure everyone has a say.
Exactly. Indonesia, I mean, being a big player in ASEAN, it can really set an example, Promote dialogue, push for peace and stability in the region. But getting back to the Pentagon report for a sec, there was something that really caught my eye. They talk about China's information warfare capabilities, and the Council on Foreign Relations, they were pretty worried about it too.
Oh, yeah. That was kind of chilling, wasn't it? Like a whole other battlefield where ideas are the weapons.
Exactly. It's happening right now even. China's using its media, social media, even things like educational exchanges to kind of push their own narrative.
So it's not just about military hardware. It's about winning hearts and minds, too.
Exactly. They understand the power of perception. They're trying to shape how people see things, both in China and around the world. It's about building support for their policies, discrediting anyone who disagrees with them, and basically controlling the conversation.
Sounds like a tough challenge.
Why?
What can Indonesia, or any democracy really, do to counter that kind of information warfare?
Well, first, you got to know what you're dealing with, right? You can't fight something you don't understand. So building awareness is key, like training journalists and policymakers to be more critical.
So, like media literacy and critical thinking, those are becoming essential skills.
Absolutely. But it's not just on individuals, right? Governments need to step up their own communication game. They need to develop their own narratives, counter disinformation, and work with other countries to share best practices.
So a new kind of diplomacy almost, one that's fought online and in the media.
Exactly. It's part of this new reality of great power competition. Military might, it's just one part of it. Economics, technology, and information, those are all important too.
And speaking of technology, the report goes into China's whole military-civil fusion strategy, right?
Right.
Where they're using civilian technology for military purposes.
Right, and it's having a huge impact. They're pouring resources into AI, quantum computing, all that cutting-edge stuff. The report even talks about intelligentized warfare, where AI plays a central role in decision-making and stuff, like something out of a movie.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But it's becoming real. How should Indonesia respond to that, this intelligentized warfare?
Well, it's a huge challenge, but it's not impossible. Investing in research and development, especially in things like cybersecurity and AI, that's crucial. But it's not just about keeping up with China. It's about finding ways to disrupt their systems, coming up with counter strategies.
So being smart about it, using your resources effectively, not just trying to match them dollar for dollar.
Exactly. That plays to Indonesia's strengths, strategic location, regional ties, skilled personnel. It's about using those assets effectively.
The report also mentions China's military modernization across the board, like the army becoming more mobile, the Air Force focusing on stealth and long-range strikes.
Right, and the rocket force, they're really building up their missile arsenal, including ones that could target U.S. bases in the region. That really changes the balance of power,
It's a lot to take in, and it raises so many questions about how Indonesia and other countries in the region can adapt.
Absolutely. It's all about strategic thinking, not just reacting to events, but anticipating them, identifying opportunities, and making smart decisions for the long term.
Which brings us back to Indonesia's own defense initiatives.
Yeah.
We talked about the National Defense Council, but there's also the whole modernization of the submarine fleet. How does that fit in?
It's all connected. The South China Sea is a crucial trade route, and Indonesia has a big role to play in keeping it secure. A modern submarine fleet helps them monitor activity, deter any aggression, protect their interests.
So it's not just about having submarines, it's about sending a message.
Exactly. It's about strength and resolve, showing that Indonesia is serious about defending its sovereignty, but also showing their commitment to peace and stability in the region.
It's a tough situation for sure. Maintaining a strong defense, but also keeping those economic ties and regional stability in check.
You got it right there. It's no easy answer. Lots of moving parts. That's why this strategic thinking is so important. I got to understand all those little details, the risks, the potential benefits, all of it.
And that's where this deep dive comes in, right? We're not just throwing information at you, but we're trying to give you the tools to actually use it, to make those decisions and come up with strategies that work for Indonesia, especially with everything changing so fast.
Exactly. The Pentagon's report, the analysis from Hudson and CFR, they all paint a clear picture. They show the challenges, but they also offer a path forward, like investing in maritime security, beefing up cyber defenses, that kind of thing. And of course, strong alliances are super important, particularly within ASEAN. And being flexible, you got to be able to adapt as things change.
Speaking of changing, the report also talks about China's space ambitions. They're developing anti-satellite weapons, expanding their space capabilities rapidly.
Yeah, and that just adds another layer to all this. Space is becoming a whole new area of competition, and China's actions are raising some eyebrows. I mean, who knows? Maybe conflict could extend beyond Earth. Now, Indonesia might not be in a space race with China, but they definitely need to be aware of the potential threats. Think about critical infrastructure, communications, even navigation systems, all that could be impacted.
So another thing to keep in mind, another piece of the puzzle, it seems like this is a whole of government kind of issue, not just a military thing.
Absolutely. That's why dialogue is so important, sharing information, making sure everyone's on the same page. The more informed everyone is, the better equipped they'll be to deal with all this.
We've covered a lot. China's Navy, their nukes, information warfare, even space. A lot to take in. But the key message here, I think, is that knowledge is power.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The more Indonesian military staff know about China's military, their goals, how they're trying to change things, the better prepared they'll be to protect Indonesia's interests and hopefully contribute to a peaceful Indo-Pacific.
And they're not alone in this, right? Indonesia has strong partners in the region, especially within ASEAN, and there are opportunities to team up with other countries who share similar concerns about China.
Exactly. Now's the time to be proactive, to build those bridges, to work together so everyone can thrive.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. The future isn't set in stone. The choices Indonesia makes today, the partners they work with, the strategies they develop, those are going to shape how this all unfolds.
A good reminder for sure. It's easy to get overwhelmed by all of this, but we can't just sit back and watch. Our actions have consequences.
So as you keep looking at the Pentagon's report and all the other info we've discussed, think about this. How can Indonesia use its strengths and its partnerships to keep things stable and secure in the region, especially with all these changes happening?
That's the big question, and it's one that Indonesian military staff are in a unique position to answer.
We hope this deep dive has given you some good things to think about. This is a conversation that needs to continue. Keep digging into the source material, keep talking with your colleagues, keep those discussions going.
Absolutely. The more we understand all this, the better chance we have of navigating it successfully.
Thanks for being with us today. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something important. Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and as always, stay informed.